to see you. How you doing? Thank you. Appreciate you. No, of course. All right, good morning. We are going to go ahead and get started. We have a few more people who will be joining us, but it's the last meeting of the pension fund this morning, so I have to go upstairs and have my final meeting with the pension trustees. But I'm grateful for everyone who is here so far. Good morning. It is a good day to reroute New York City's school bus transportation system so our kids get to school safely and on time, so they can attend after school, so students with disabilities aren't locked out of the system and disrespected, and so all New York families can have the peace of mind that every family deserves. Today we are releasing both our audit of New York City's school bus transportation system and an accompanying policy report, Routing Our Children's Future, which highlights some of the findings of the audit and really sets a course forward for New York City's public transportation system. I am so grateful to be joined by people who have been fighting to transform this system for many years, not quite all 46 years that these current contracts have been in place, but I think it feels like that to many of them. And I want to especially shout out the Public Advocate's Office. The Public Advocate will be here shortly. He's been working very closely with advocates. Advocates for Children, who have been doing really remarkable work on this, New York Appleseed, 504 Dems, a number of amazing parent leaders, some of who you'll hear from, and folks like the District 75 President's Council, students like Aja, who have been standing up for themselves and insisting that the system get better. This is such a long-standing effort. And honestly, when we started the audit, I asked the team, I said, look, everyone knows the school bus transportation system is broken. How are we going to make this useful for change? And I have to tell you this morning, I feel very hopeful because change is possible. And that is because this set of people and many others have been advocating so fiercely for so long, telling the stories of what is happening when bus trips are missed, when kids are left standing, when the parents don't know where their kids are, when they're on the bus forever, when they're stuck both outside or at school, because the data is clear, but also because we now have a real moment of opportunity. Thanks to advocacy by many of the folks standing here and others, the Panel for Educational Policy agreed to do a shorter renewal of the system and gives the incoming Mamdani administration an opportunity to genuinely restructure the system. And that is the goal. We want a genuine transformation of this system, not nibbling around the edges. And that's going to take some work. And so that's what we're pushing for today. As you know, New York City Public Schools is the largest school system in the country, and every day 145,000 students are transported to public, charter, and private schools at a cost of nearly $2 billion a year. 145,000 students is only about 12% of those in the system, but that's larger than the school systems of Dallas or Philadelphia or San Diego every single day. Unfortunately, in so many cases, there are problems with their ride to school. A real culture of underperformance by the bus companies and weak oversight by DOE's Office of Pupil Transportation has left students stranded, has left families anxious, has locked kids out of after school, and actually shortchanged the city as well. Last year, Department of Education failed to collect nearly $43 million in penalties for violations just of basic obligations by the bus companies to have the GPS on the buses. At the same time, bus drivers and attendants face long-standing workforce challenges of low pay and poor benefits packages. and a lack of training and workforce development, and that really harms both young people, as we heard when Borough President Antonio Reynoso talked about the bad treatment that his own kid has gotten this year. It harms both our students and the workers themselves when you have a system that doesn't give them adequate pay or training or dignity. And as a result, the city is currently short 300 drivers because they're not successful in recruiting enough, given how poor the jobs are and are perceived to be. That's why we authorized this audit. And the audit confirms what everybody standing here knows. Despite investment and successive promises to improve, services remain poor and disproportionately harm students with special needs. OPT received 154,376 complaints in the 23-24 school year, which is the last year we audited. Most of them, almost 100,000, related to the curb to school routes that particularly serve students with special needs. Complaints have been growing, even though there's long-standing concerns with the system. From 21 to 24, complaints about disconnected calls to OPT, which really should not be an issue, grew by 365%. Complaints about special ed pickups and drop-offs increased by 55%. Complaints for no pickup rose by almost 90% over those 3 years. The audit data shows that there's overwhelming impact in particular on special needs routes. Bus vendors reported 83,573 delays in that school year, 63,000 of them related to those curb to school routes. 24% of those delays lasted for more than an hour, and basically all of the 10 worst, what are called problem runs on which there are problems over and over again, are with bus companies with those curb to school routes. Meanwhile, DOE has failed to take adequate corrective action in the face of this appalling performance. They don't insist that the bus companies, as I say, meet their obligations to use new technology, to have the GPSs on the buses, or even collect the fines when they don't. There was supposed to be a new routing technology that the city has been working on, but that is now 4 years delayed and still really nowhere in sight. DOE did not enforce driver login rules that require vendors to log bus route start times, and as I say, failed to assess $43 million in liquidated damages. They only assessed $1.7 million out of the $44 million in damages that the companies owed. And that's not enough money to reboot the system, but when you don't actually impose the fines that are required, it's no wonder that the companies don't take the expectations seriously. There are a lot of underlying causes of these failures. DOE doesn't leverage its oversight tools adequately or enforce the tools that it has. And there is, as folks know, a long-standing set of challenges restructuring these contracts. And so that's why we issued this additional report alongside the audit. The audit itself makes 12 recommendations that DOE largely agreed to implement, but that is not going to fix the system. The system needs a root and branch transformation. And now, with 3-year contract extensions running through June 30th, 2028, the new administration has a rare window to finally tackle and fundamentally reform a system that has resisted change for decades. As I say, these current contracts go back 46 years, and the city has been largely stuck with them because a court case won't allow the city to put some basic job protections into the RFP. The city has hesitated to fundamentally bid out or restructure the system out of, hello, Dr. Sharon, thank you for being here, out of an understandable concern that current bus drivers shouldn't lose their jobs. And given the ways that the bus companies have acted, it is reasonable to worry that if there was an RFP and the city's required to use lowest responsible bidder procedures, that bus companies would just bid low wages, fire the people that have been driving for the longest time, and bring on new people at the lowest wages if there was to be a new RFP. So advocates have been pushing for quite some time in Albany for a state law that would allow the city to put those long-time worker protections into the RFP. And so what we wanted to do is say, okay, as the city gears up for the session in Albany, let's take one step back and think about all the possibilities for transformation. And the report looks at 3 different potential paths that the city could go down to do that. The first is rebid all the contracts with a new RFP, presuming that Albany first passes legislation allowing those EPP protections once the law would be passed in the state legislature, which could, of course, happen this session. Then the city could issue a new RFP, not only with the EPP protections. I want to be clear, the new RFP has to be a root and branch change in the expectations of the school bus companies, that they provide the service that all students deserve, that they have real incentives to actually make every route safe, on time, and successful, that there are real consequences when they don't, that there are responsible operator requirements, that there's shifts to better and more sustainable bus technologies. A new RFP could set fundamentally new expectations, but that couldn't happen until the EPP is in place. So that's path one. It's got some pluses, which is it's familiar, people know how to do it, it uses kind of an existing structure, but it has some downsides too. And as I have talked to advocates, I have heard people say, look, yeah, of course, we don't want to fire the existing drivers, but just trying to up the standards modestly in a new contract that would likely be won by many of the same bidders, there's not a lot of reason to believe that will really make meaningful change. So I think there is skepticism, or at least if that pathway is chosen to competitive reprocurement, it needs to really have very serious changes to the expectations and the relationship between OPT and the companies. That's path one. Path two would be to municipalize the system, to have the city operate school buses, as many cities do all around the country and the world. The MTA runs a bus system that, I'm not saying every bus is on time, but they're a lot closer to on time and regular than our school buses are. So the city, either on its own or in some kind of partnership with the MTA, could operate the buses and then make sure that there's a level of quality service that every student deserves. The buses would then be essentially an extension of the school system, and you would start treating those kids as students from the moment you pick them up. You could even imagine like the buses starting to be places of warmth and social and emotional well-being and learning, but at least the city would have real control. So that has some upsides. Of course, it has some challenges as well. The city would have to stand up that whole new operation, would have to procure the buses, bring on, drivers and attendants, and to do that all by the time in 2.5 years that the 2028 school year begins would be a big challenge, not impossible. We've done big things, so that's potential path two. And the third potential path is nonprofit management. There is actually a relatively new nonprofit school bus operator, the New York City School Bus Umbrella Services, Inc., which took over some of the routes from one of the previous contractors. And they could grow either by themselves or in partnership with other organizations into a citywide operator that did a much larger chunk, some, most, all of the city's routes. We provide a lot of other kinds of services through nonprofit management. The public libraries are 3 nonprofit organizations that operate in partnership with the city. And there are places around the country as well. This is also in some ways the model of the Public Housing Preservation Trust that the city's done recently, sort of an in-between going to full municipalization or leaving it just in market hands to say, let's work with some mission-driven operators. So we don't take a choice between those three paths. We lay all those three paths out with their strengths and weaknesses in the report. Our recommendation here is that Mayor-elect Mamdani appoint a school bus czar to immediately begin working with the advocates here in conversation with all of the stakeholders in the system. Look at the audit, look at the report, talk to the stakeholders, and develop a plan quickly. Because I know it sounds like a 3-year extension is a long time, and we heard the other night many people say, that's too long, I want change faster, and we understand the appetite for change immediately. Realistically, given the ways that the wheels of government can grind, even getting it done in this amount of time is going to take urgency. If change is needed in Albany for the EPP and the first pathway, that would have to happen this year in Albany, this session, in order to really have time to fundamentally restructure the RFP and get it out the door in time to have the reprocurement when the term is up. And if we're going to shift either to a municipal system or a nonprofit system, that will also take really significant and substantial work. So even as this administration is standing up all at once, and I think we're going to hear later today some appointments that I'm excited to hear, we urge the mayor-elect to appoint a school bus czar to begin working immediately to evaluate these three pathways, work together to figure out what to do, and get the city back on track, reroute our New York City public school bus system. He can make such a fundamental difference. This may not be something that, you know, the average New Yorker who doesn't have a kid in the school system or whose kid goes to the school around the corner from their house thinks about every day, but 145,000 of our young people every day, many of them kids with special needs who travel a distance to get to a school that can really meet them and serve their needs, are stuck in a system that is failing. And we have the opportunity to change that in 2.5 years. We can start a system that genuinely meets the needs of all those kids. That is an ambition worth having and one we're setting about to achieve today. I want to thank the team in the Controller's Office, both in the Audit Bureau under Deputy Controller Maura Hayes-Chafe, and I want to thank the policy team, especially Lara Lai. Yeah, we should clap for all of them and their teams. They were able to get some consulting from Deputy Controller for Contracting and Procurement, Charlotte Hamamjian, who knows a lot about this system as well. The whole team in the Controller's Office has really done a great job. But I want to end where I began, with gratitude to the advocates, because as much as we dig and look into a system and get the numbers, these are folks like Aja who lived with the failing transportation of these buses day after day after day, parents who worried about where their kids were when they couldn't find them, and who have been just fighting and insisting on a system that works better for all our kids. So thanks to all of you for doing that hard work and fighting every day. We've been joined by Nick Astor, who's been leading the work in our office for people with disabilities. Thank you, Nick. One of the things I'll just say, you know, I'm on my waning days as New York City Controller, and one of the things I actually feel proudest of in this office is the work that Nick has stood up. There wasn't a liaison or a body of work around New Yorkers with disabilities, and this office's work to make the city more accessible in its schools, jobs, transportation, housing, has really been tremendous. So thank you. All right, we're now going to hear from Sarah Catalanotto. And this was probably my favorite acronym of any New York City advocacy group. As you know, the parents to improve school bus transportation are pissed, and this audit shows with good reason. Sarah.
All right. Mic position is okay? Okay, good morning. School bus service done well enables the education, safety, and civil rights of our youth. It helps the environment and helps parents who need to work in the daytime. We are grateful for school bus staff who put in long hours in all weather on tricky routes. Having worked on busing issues since 2010, PIST is gratified to see this audit. Comptroller Lander's team has confirmed with data what families and workers have said for years, that this service must be run better. Intentions aside, flaws in the OPT approach cause thousands of kids to miss school time, much more so than their peers who don't ride the yellow bus. Parents have to leave jobs and borrow cars, like the moms of disabled kindergartners in Queens whose bus route just started this Monday. What other school system outsources busing to 50 different private companies? This patchwork setup interferes with getting routes staffed, split, or reassigned to meet medical needs of riders. Who decided that 2 hours is an acceptable route length? That K through 12th grade is one age group? That 5 schools per route is doable? And that a bus is only late if it's more than 30 minutes late? And why do roughly 300 million taxpayer dollars a year go to fleet owner profits when buying out the fleets once would probably cost less than that? Choices made at Tweed in 2012 and 2020 sped up a shortage of qualified drivers. Now, when you call OPT's $10 million call center, this shortage is mentioned as a reason to expect late or no-show buses. Recruiting and retaining enough workers would make shorter, stable routes possible. Instead, we get the VIA tracking app, which, when it's not glitching, can tell parents, hey, guess what, the bus is still late. The server for this app is 7 time zones away. Many parents send us screenshots of an error message or gibberish or a cartoon bus that's cute but has no map behind it. How many millions went to VIA? Read the audit. New York City busing needs a drastically different approach now. We urge the incoming mayor's team and all New Yorkers to engage with parent leaders on how to advance proposals from this report. Let's achieve transit equity for all students and EPP for all bus workers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm going to hand emceeing tasks over to Laura Lai, because I got to go upstairs and have my last meeting with the pension fund. But we have a couple more parent advocates, and then the public advocate will be here as well. And then the team that conducted both the audit and developed the report can take any more detailed questions that you have. So I will leave you by introducing our next great parent advocate, Rima Izquierdo, who's a parent, who is the Bronx Borough President's PEP member, and a longtime advocate on these issues. Thank you, Rima.
Thank you. Good morning and grand rising to all. Thank you, Comptroller Lander and the Public Advocate Williams, for standing with families and for taking our concerns seriously. Some of you may know me as a member of the school board, and some of you may know me as the District 75 President's Council President. But today, I come to you as a mother, as a parent, as an advocate, and a voice for the voiceless. My name is Rima Izquierdo, and I am a 17-year bus mom. I stand before you today as the collective voice of hundreds of thousands of children who rely on school buses every day, and the parents who have endured years, decades of poor service, weak oversight, and broken trust in New York City's pupil transportation system. The comptroller's audit of the Office of Pupil Transportation will not surprise parents. It validates what we've lived: missed pickups, hours-long rides, children dropped at wrong locations, unsafe conditions, no communication, no accountability. For families of children with disabilities, these failures are not inconveniences. They are barriers to education. They are violations of the law. When transportation fails, school access fails. Children miss instruction, parents miss work, anxiety rises, and trust erodes. And the erosion has real consequences. Instead of preparing to celebrate my 2-year anniversary at work, I'm marking the 1-year anniversary of when I had to leave my job because busing could not be relied on. My story is not unique. Families across the city have lost income, stability, and opportunity because transportation was treated as an afterthought. This crisis did not happen overnight. Families have lived through years of turbulent bus contract negotiations and systemic instability, all while the most basic purpose of pupil transportation was lost in the process. Let me take a moment to remind everyone that the point of pupil transportation is simple: get students to school safely, on time, and consistently so they can be educated. That is the expectation, and it is not unreasonable. The comptroller's audit makes clear that this system cannot improve without real oversight, enforceable standards, transparency, and consequences when failures occur. But let me be very clear about this moment. Parents will no longer stand idly by while decisions are made for us without us. The disability community has a long-said motto: nothing about us without us. And today, we say that to the incoming mayor. We say it to the legislators and the elected officials. We say it to the agency leadership and policymakers. You will not fix this system. You will not reform contracts. You will not redesign transportation policy without families at the table anymore. We are not just stakeholders. We are partners. And we bring lived experience that the system can no longer afford to ignore. Transportation is not a luxury. It is a gateway to education and equity. So today, we thank the comptroller for this audit and for shining a light where families have been pointing for years. And we thank the public advocate for continuing to stand with parents and children. But audits don't move buses. Action does. Let this be the turning point where the city finally builds a transportation system worthy of its children, because New York City students don't need excuses. They need a bus that shows up safely, on time, every day. On behalf of every bus student and parent, past, present, but especially future, thank you.
Rima, thank you so much for those powerful words. It's now my pleasure to welcome up to the podium Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, an incredible advocate on this issue as well, and a partner to our office, going back to the letter that he and the comptroller wrote this summer about bus contracts. Thank you so much.
And also a huge Knicks fan, so go Knicks. Thank you. Peace and blessing, love and light to everyone. I know the comptroller is not here, but I want to make sure I thank him for all the data and information for this report, and all the advocates who are here, and particularly the parents who are sharing their stories of woe, trying to just get their kids to school. So as mentioned, I'm sure New York City school bus contracts are over 45 years old, which means if you had a bus when you were a child, you probably had the same contract that your child had, that your child has now. That's how old it is. And I've been proud to have my office advocate alongside the comptroller on this issue for years, with a simple goal that I hope we all share, which is to create a modern-day bus system that gets New York City kids to school on time every day. That is a goal that everyone's been trying to get to. That is a goal that we failed on year after year. The comptroller has provided us with the data that supports what students, families, and advocates and educators have been saying for decades, that 3 possible solutions that our new administration can take on. The findings of the audit are striking. They find a system that is outdated and out of compliance in many ways. DOE does not ensure that required practice runs are completed. It not readily use available global positioning systems or other other technology that would improve the routes. They don't adequately oversee vendors or hold them accountable for poor performances. And DOE's reactive approach primarily relies on individual complaints to identify problems. We're joining the comptroller and recommending a lot of things, simple of which you should start communicating with parents again the way you did before. I understand that they stopped even mailing out the information, so folks don't even have that information unless you have a student account, which is difficult to get and difficult to work through. And with one of my reports we put out recently, we should be trying to do that in as many languages as possible, because language access is an issue. So if we can't even communicate properly, how are we going to even let folks know what's going on with the troubled system that already exists? Students throughout the city should have access to the best busing available, from morning pickup to after-school activities. At bare minimum, that will help students get to school on time. Teachers and parents have less worries about student safety and whereabouts. To get the most out of classrooms, students are depending on us to get them there in the first place. And as is mentioned, if you are dealing with a whole bunch of other issues, like disabilities, like being housing challenged, all of those things are intersecting, making it much worse. And these are folks that need the most help, and they seem to continually get the least. As I heard another speaker saying, this is often put on the back burner on the discussions of education. You can't get a good education if you can't get to school. So this is really, really critical to get these systems of transportation in made better so that everything else can fall into place. Very rarely do we have an opportunity like this where everything seems to be right on time to get this done. We just need the political will to push it over, and I'm happy to have been working with the comptroller on this. I want to continue to work with the advocates, the incoming, and everyone to make sure we have a bus system that people can be proud of and can get their kids to school on time and safe. Having kids now not knowing where your kid is or if they're in school on time is a very heart-wrenching approach, a very heart-wrenching way to start the day. And I know how it is for kids just to try to be able to settle in to get the education they need. If you can't even understand where you are, or if you're getting there late or you get there on time, it's just heart-wrenching for everybody, not to mention how it impacts people's getting to work on time and things of that nature. So this is a very intersecting issue. Hopefully we can get it done. Thank you so much.
Our last speaker today is Rashida Bunting.
Okay.
Rashida is a disability rights advocate. She's the first vice president of the New York affiliate of the National Federation of the Blind. She's the chair of the New York State Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, among many other roles that she plays. And she's a former New York City student, so she has a lot to share with us today. Thank you, Rashida.
Yes, no. Can you hear me? Because I'm losing my voice. Thank you so much for having me. When I was asked to speak about this today, I kind of thought, from what angle do I speak on this with? I was also a special educator, so I can speak to figuring out where are my students because the bus didn't get them there on time and marking them absent. But I felt this would make more of an impact if I just spoke from my life experiences. Now, it blows my mind as I was standing there listening to all of the stats and that our public advocate said that this hasn't changed in 45 years. I am 51 years old, which means that in 1980, I was a product of mainstreaming. And I'm blind, for those who don't know. And I also grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And as Sarah was talking, and Rima, and the comptroller, and Jumaane Williams was speaking, this just brought back so many memories. I remember having to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning because I lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and because I needed vision services, I had to travel all the way on the other side of Brooklyn. And Brooklyn is huge. Just to receive those vision services because they weren't offered in my community school where I had my friends that I played with every day. I remember waiting outside with my mother for 2 hours in 19 degrees. We didn't have cell phones back then. And waiting and wondering and waiting. And she's calling the bus companies and waiting and not getting to school. I remember having excessive absences. I remember staying home for 1 week straight because the bus didn't come pick me up. And more so, I remember having a stay-at-home mom, which I thought was cool at the time because, you know, I come home and mommy is there and the food is cooked. But I also found out when I got travel trained and I started high school at Brooklyn Tech High School, I remember having to take one bus, the B-52, to get there, and mom going back to work. And I asked her, I said, why did you wait so long to go back to work? Because my mother had a college degree. She said, I had nobody to get you off the bus, which means that cut a lot of the income out in my household. My father worked and he made money, but we all know money moves, makes the world go around. I also remember when my mom went back to work, us having the income at that time to move from Bed-Stuy to where we live now in Canarsie for a better living. So this all drives the point home of how impactful these changes are when it comes to adequate bus services. I remember the lack of safety on the bus, where there was a time when we actually had to have a cop drive us on the bus because of violence issues. I also remember my mom in tears. I'm getting home. A lot of parents, advocates have spoken about getting to work late, getting to school late, which I do remember. Getting to school at 11 o'clock. I'm coming off the bus and going straight into the lunchroom for lunch. But I also remember coming home at 5:30 a lot because the bus broke down, or we got stalled, or we got stopped by the cops because my bus driver wanted to race another bus driver. You know, and these are true stories. And she's not knowing where I'm at, and she's walking about and crying. So, and I also remember not being able to be fully immersed in the school activity and hearing at lunch how much fun everybody had at cheerleading and after school, and how much fun everybody had at the chess club. And why weren't you there, Rashida? Because I had to get to the bus. And this is what all of our New York City students are still experiencing 45 years later. I implore the new administration to lean into the parent advocates, our comptroller, Brad Lander, with the Audit. He came up with some great ideas. Lean into these nonprofits, especially those that service the disability community. I heard that Dr. Sharon is here. Sydney's a great organization to lean into. Lean into New York City MTA. Just lean into us to make those changes for our students. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. I think we have some time for a Q&A. The Deputy Comptroller for Audit and I will be happy to answer any questions related to the audit and the report. And the advocates, of course, and parents are here to take any questions for them, if there are any.
Hi, I just have one question. Jessica from WNYC and Alchemist. If contracts are the way that things move forward, new contracts, what could change specifically in the contracts to improve service?
I'm happy to take that, but I want to offer Rima the chance to talk about that as well. She's very much in the weeds on the terms of the contracts and what should change. Rima, do you feel comfortable talking?
So there's a lot of language in the contracts that is problematic. There are things that we are asking for that are not precluded from the contracts, but there is also nothing in the contracts to make sure that we aren't charged an exorbitant amount of money for it. And so there's nothing in the contract that says we can't have after school or Saturday busing, but there's nothing in the contract to stop the companies from making us pay for the time and a half they think they might have to have their workers working. We would like separate shifts. right? We would like that contracted because we also want the union and the workers to be protected. There's a lot of language in the contracts that could be updated about buses and about the mechanical functionality and the requirement to switch buses out when there are certain issues versus waiting the about 12 years it takes for them, their lifetime to expire where they are permitted to use them for. And so there are a lot of points in the contract that are not fleshed out in a way that give us strength at the bargaining table. And so these are different points that we would be able to amend within a rebid that would then give us the flexibility to build a contract that makes more sense and is student-centered, because the point of pupil transportation is to get kids to school.
Thank you, Rima. And I'll just add that since the original contracts have just been extended over and over again, there are rules that are dictated in part by state education law about what you can actually add to a contract. So there's only you can't take an original contract from 1979 and just add after school to it. You can't add the requirement for universal air conditioning to it. You can't necessarily add changes like Rima mentioned around creating different shifts for drivers. So those are things that would be needed that require a rebid. The other thing that could be possible with a rebid is some measure of consolidation. So there's no requirement for DOE to continue having 48 vendors, and that's some level of consolidation that could take place using a new procurement. The one thing that a new procurement doesn't address are the problems at OPT. And so, just rebidding the system, there would have to be a separate process to really address those problems.